November 9, 1741. The deck of the St. Peter, somewhere in a gray, churning void of the North Pacific. The ship is a speck, a splinter of old Europe groaning against the relentless heave of an alien sea. The air is a frigid spray that stings the eyes and coats the ropes in a brittle, crystalline shell. Vitus Bering, a Danish captain in service to the Russian Tsar, is a ghost of the man who left Kamchatka. His body is racked with scurvy, his skin the color of the low, bruised clouds. He clutches the rail, not with the grip of an explorer, but of a dying man seeking purchase on a tilting world. His bloodshot eyes scan the western horizon, not for glory anymore, but for a coastline, any coastline that isn't a mirage born of delirium. Behind him, the crew moves like specters. The sound is a symphony of misery, the ceaseless coughs from below decks, the protesting groan of timber, the howl of wind in the rigging. They have been at sea for months, lost in a fog-shrouded purgatory, their maps worthless, their supplies rotting. They are sailing off the edge of the known world, chasing rumors of a great land to the east, a land rumored to be rich with fur-bearing creatures whose pelts are softer than sable and worth more than gold in the courts of St. Petersburg. Then, through a rent in the fog, a shape hardens. Not another rolling wave of liquid lead, but a dark, jagged line. A mountain peak impossibly tall, crowned with snow even in this early winter. A cry goes up weak but fervent. Land, Alieska. The word from the Alutalaxksak, meaning the mainland or the object toward which the action of the sea is directed, is whispered. It is not a discovery for those who have lived there for 10,000 years, but for the fevered men on the St. Peter, it is a reprieve. They do not see a homeland. They see a fortress of resources, a frozen treasury. Bering's Landing, when it comes weeks later on Kayak Island, is not a triumphant planting of a flag. It is a desperate scramble for fresh water and sea otter meat. He notes the abundance, the potential wealth, but he is too ill to comprehend the scale. He will die on these islands, his body buried in the sand of the Commander Islands, a nameless grave for the man who cracked open the door to a continent. The door would not be closed again. The hunt was on. June 20th, 1784. Three Rocks Bay, Kodiak Island. The Promyshleniki, the Russian fur traders, are not sailors or statesmen. They are a brutal confederation of hunters, exiles, and Cossacks, their hands calloused from the oar and the rifle, their faces weathered into permanent sneers by the salt and the cold. Their vessel, a rugged shidduch, is beached on the gravel shore like a sea monster carcass. Grigory Shelikov, the ambitious Siberian merchant who financed this expedition, stands apart. He watches as his men unload not just barrels and tools, but chains, shackles, and a small, muzzle-loaded cannon. The air is thick with the smell of damp spruce, rotting kelp, and the acrid scent of fear. From the tree line, unseen eyes watch them, the Alutiiq people, the Sugpiaq, who have shaped this coast for millennia. To them, these bearded men with their clanking metal and strange, floating lodges are an incomprehensible blight. The first contact is not trade, it is demand. Shelikov needs hunters, and he needs them now. The sea otter pelts, the soft gold, are piled in the hold, but the otters near shore are already growing scarce. What follows is not colonization as a slow seep of culture. It is a violent extraction. Shelikov's men take hostages. They point their guns and their cannon at Alutiiq villages, demanding a quota of pelts from every able-bodied man. Resistance is met with exemplary violence. Villages burned, leaders executed, families separated. The Alutiiq become serfs of the sea, forced to hunt in their ikiaks, kayaks, for the benefit of distant czars. The Russian Orthodox priests who soon follow, like the gentle but firm Father Herman, offer a spiritual balm and literacy. But they are also the agents of a system that seeks to replace one soul with another, to pacify a population through faith while the body is enslaved for profit. This is the dark, foundational economy of Russian America. It is a remote, company-run gulag where the currency is otter fur and the law is the knout. The land is not settled, it is mined. And as the otters are driven to the brink of extinction from California to the Aleutians, the company's hunger only grows, pushing them deeper into the mainland, up uncharted rivers into the territories of the Tlingit, a powerful warrior nation that will not bow so easily. September 24th, 1804. The wind carries the smell of burnt cedar and gunpowder through the dense fog clinging to Sitka Sound. Alexander Baranov, chief manager of the Russian-American Company, stands on the deck of the Neva, a Russian warship. He is a small, stout man of 57, his body a testament to decades of hardship, scars from a bear, a limp from a broken leg set badly in the wilderness. His eyes, however, are chips of flint. Before him on the strategic shore lies the smoking remnant of his previous fort, St. Michael Redoubt, destroyed months before by the Tlingit. This is not just a business loss, it is a personal and imperial insult. The Tlingit, led by the powerful Kiks, Adi clan are the unconquerable wall against Russian expansion. They are masterful traders, shrewd diplomats, and fierce warriors, clad in formidable wooden armor and helmets. They do not see the Russians as superior, but as another tribe to be managed, bullied, or eradicated. They have matchlock muskets obtained from British and American traders, and they know the labyrinthine channels of their homeland better than any outsider. Baranov's plan is audacious. The Neva begins a calculated, thunderous bombardment of the Tlinkit's newly built fort, Shisky Nu, the sapling fort. Cannonballs tear into the massive spruce stockade. But the Tlingit return fire, their chants and war cries rising above the din. For 6 days, a brutal siege rages. Baranov is wounded in the arm by a Tlingit musket ball. The attack nearly falters. Victory, when it comes, is not from overwhelming force, but from a calculated Tlingit withdrawal. They slip away into the mountains under cover of night, preserving their people to fight another day. Baranov claims the ground. He orders the construction of a new, stronger bastion, Novo-Arkhangelsk, New Archangel. It rises from the rainforest, a palisaded testament to imperial will, built with slave labor from displaced Alut and Alutiiq hunters. For 2 decades, this wooden fortress becomes the unlikely capital of Russian America, a place of crude majesty, where ballroom dances are held under whale oil lamps while sentries scan the tree line for Tlingit war parties. Baranov rules with an iron fist, battling rival American and British traders, suppressing unrest, and stretching the company's reach down the California coast to Fort Ross. But his empire is a fragile one, built on terror, debt, and a dwindling resource. The sea otters are almost gone, and 4,000 miles away in the gilded halls of St. Petersburg, czars are beginning to wonder if this frozen, rebellious colony is more a burden than a prize. March 29, 1867. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, St. Petersburg. The room is opulent, warmed by a marble fireplace, yet a profound chill hangs in the air. It is the chill of geopolitical failure. Across a polished table, Eduard de Stokel, the Russian minister to the United States, studies the weary face of Secretary of State William H. Seward. Seward, a man of relentless expansionist vision, has been negotiating for days through the night, fueled by coffee and a singular obsession, to extend American dominion to the very edge of the Asian continent. But listen not to their hushed diplomatic tones. Instead, listen to the silence from Alaska, the silence of empty sea otter rookeries, the silence of Tlingit warriors biding their time, the silence of a treasury bleeding rubles to prop up a colony that has never turned a profit. For Russia, Alaska is a strategic liability. They lost the Crimean War. The British Royal Navy, their nemesis, could easily seize this remote territory from the Pacific. Better to sell it to the Americans, Stokel reasons, and create a buffer against London. Seward sees what others call a frozen wasteland as the final piece of the continental puzzle. He sees the coal deposits reported by surveyors. He sees the potential fisheries. He sees a gateway to the markets of Asia. The negotiations are a delicate dance. Stokel, under secret instruction from the Tsar, is desperate to sell but must appear reluctant. Seward is desperate to buy but must appear cautious for a public and a press that will surely mock the purchase. They finally settle on a price, $7.2 million, $2 an acre. The treaty signing the next day is swift. There is no celebration in Alaska. No one consults the Sugpiaq, the Tlingit, the Yupik, the Inupiat. Their homeland is transferred like a parcel of unwanted furniture in a secret deal between 2 empires that have never truly set foot on most of its soil. When the news breaks in the United States, the newspapers roar with derision. They call it Seward's Folly, Seward's Icebox, Johnson's Polar Bear Garden. The American public sees only a map colored with new territory, a blank space of incomprehensible size and frozen mystery. They have no idea what they have bought or who they have bought it from. For the people of Alaska, one distant master is simply replaced by another, with no clear idea of what this new flag flying over Novo-Arkhangelsk, now Sitka, will actually mean. October 18, 1877. The U.S. Army barracks at Sitka. The rain is a constant drumming presence on the shingled roof. Captain John Mendenhall, U.S. Army, stares out a window at the muddy parade ground, a sheet of official correspondence crumpled in his hand. He commands a force of 146 men, the sole military representation of the United States in the entire district of Alaska. A territory 1/5 the size of the continental U.S., his orders are vague, his resources negligible, his authority contested. For the first 20 years of American rule, Alaska is not a territory but a customs district, a legal orphan. It is Seward's icebox in practice, a land deemed worthless, left to languish in bureaucratic twilight. In Sitka, a handful of U.S. officials, soldiers, and a motley collection of holdover Russian settlers, Tlingit traders, and German Jewish merchants create a fragile, often tense micro-society. The Promishlenniki are gone, but the salmon canneries have arrived, bringing with them a new kind of industrial exploitation. Asian and European immigrant laborers work in brutal conditions. While Alaska natives are marginalized, their land claims ignored, their traditional economies disrupted. The U.S. government provides almost nothing. No roads, no schools, no courts that function with any consistency. The law is often whoever has the most men or the fastest trigger finger. This is the era of saloon politics and gunboat diplomacy. Captain Mendenhall's primary duty is not to govern, but to prevent the Tlingit from overrunning the few white settlements, and to occasionally send a vessel to show the flag along a coast thousands of miles long. The great promise of American ownership is a bitter joke. Alaska is a forgotten stepchild, a drain on the treasury, its vast interior a blank space labeled unexplored. Then a whisper becomes a rumor becomes a stampede. August 17, 1896. The steamer Excelsior docks in San Francisco, its passengers disembarking with sacks of raw gold nuggets from the Klondike, just over the Canadian border in the Yukon. The world's eyes snap north. But the true seismic shift for Alaska comes a year later in July 1897 when prospectors strike pay dirt not in Canada, but on the beaches of Nome on American soil. And then again in 1902 on a creek feeding the Tanana River, a prospector named Felix Pedro finds color. The rush to the last frontier is on. Tens of thousands pour in through Skagway and Daya over the deadly Chilkoot and White Passes into a land utterly unprepared for them. The neglect is over. It is about to be replaced by chaos, greed, and a new, frantic chapter of exploitation. July 22, 1900. Nome, Alaska. The beach is not sand, but a churning, filthy sludge of mud, gravel, and humanity. 10,000 souls are crammed into a makeshift city of tents and driftwood shacks that stretches for miles along the Bering Sea shore. The air reeks of sewage, smoked fish, and the constant, acrid tang of wet ash from 1,000 fires. This is not a town. It is a fever. Men and some women are on their hands and knees in the icy surf, panning not in streams but in the salt water, using rockers and sluice boxes, their fingers numb and cracked. They are the poor man's diggings, where a claim is just a few feet of shoreline. But look inland to the creeks feeding the rich veins of Anvil Creek and Dexter Gulch. Here, the real power consolidates. The Big Three, Alexander Mackenzie, a political fixer from the Dakota Territories, Charles D. Lane, a ruthless mining magnate, and Swiftwater Bill Gates, a flamboyant gambler, have arrived not with pans but with lawyers, hired guns, and corrupt judges. They orchestrate one of the most brazen claim-jumping schemes in American history. Using a compliant U.S. commissioner, they seize the richest claims from the original discoverers, men like Japhet Lindbergh and the Lucky Swedes. The U.S. Army, in the form of the 7th Infantry under Colonel George M. Randall, is sent not to protect the miners but to impose order, an order that often benefits the syndicates. A tense, armed standoff simmers. This is the dark underbelly of the gold rush myth. It's not just hardy individualism, it's corporate graft and legalized theft on a grand scale. The story repeats in Fairbanks, in Iditarod, in every new strike. Alaska's wealth is being siphoned off by outside interests as efficiently as the Russians siphoned furs. And beneath the chaos, a deeper, older pattern reasserts itself. The Inupiat of Nome, who called this place Sitnasuak, are pushed to the margins, their hunting grounds destroyed, their society ravaged by disease and alcohol brought by the stampeders. The land itself is scarred, hillsides turned inside out by hydraulic monitors, forests clear-cut for fuel and building, streams run thick with silt. The gold, like the otter pelts before it, flows out. The scars, the social wreckage, and the precedent of exploitation remain. The frontier is closed in the lower 48, but here it is being brutally reinvented, proving that the turning point from neglect is not stewardship, but a new, more frantic form of harvesting. June 3, 1942. 5:38 a.m. The island of Unalaska, Aleutian Islands. A young U.S. Army sentry, Private John T. McMurphy, squints through the perpetual, soupy fog of Dutch Harbor. His feet are numb in his boots, his wool uniform damp and heavy. The drone he hears at first blends with the ever-present wind. Then it sharpens, multiplies. From the west, emerging like specters from the gray, come the angular shapes of Japanese Zero fighters, their red Hinamaru stark against the dull sky. Behind them, the darker silhouettes of Kate torpedo bombers. The air raid sirens begin to wail, a sound never before heard on American soil in this war. For 6 months, Japan has held 2 of these fog-wrapped islands, Attu and Kiska. It is the first foreign occupation of U.S. territory since the War of 1812. Washington is apoplectic. Alaska is no longer a remote, frozen backwater. It is the vulnerable underbelly of the continent, a stepping stone for invasion. The response is monumental and transformative. The U.S. military descends upon Alaska like an avalanche. Over 150,000 troops are sent north. They build bases, roads, and the Alaska-Canada ALCAN Highway, 400 miles carved through pristine wilderness in a mere 8 months, a feat of brutal, desperate engineering. Follow the 7th Infantry Division as it lands on Attu in May 1943 into a meat grinder. The battle is fought in freezing mud, driving wind, and zero visibility. Soldiers suffer more casualties from trench foot and exposure than from Japanese bullets. It ends in a horrific final banzai charge, but the war machine, once set in motion, does not leave. The Cold War turns Alaska into the top of the world front line. Distant early warning, DEW, line radar stations dot the Arctic coast. Air Force bases like Eielson and Elmendorf become sprawling cities of strategic imperative. This martial influx does two contradictory things. It finally forces the federal government to invest billions in Alaska's infrastructure, binding it to the rest of America with steel and concrete. And it introduces a new, powerful force, a permanent, vocal population of military personnel and veterans who see Alaska's potential and fight for its statehood. The war thawed Alaska from its glacial isolation, not with gold, but with geopolitics. It warmed the permafrost for a new kind of future, one where Alaska's value was not in what could be taken from it, but in where it sat on the map. The stage was set for the final, contentious act, becoming the 49th state. March 13, 1968. Prudhoe Bay State one well Arctic coastal plain. The temperature is 40 degrees below zero. The wind screams across the featureless white expanse, a force that sears exposed skin and turns machinery into brittle sculptures of ice. Inside the drilling shack, roughnecks from Texas and Louisiana, men more accustomed to Gulf Coast humidity, huddle around instruments, their breath frosting in the air. They have been drilling for months through endless layers of permafrost and rock, chasing a seismic ghost. Then the mudloggers' shout cuts through the roar of the generators. Show! It's not a gusher. The pressure here is too controlled for that, but the core samples and gas readings tell the story. They have just tapped the largest conventional oil field in North America, an estimated 25 billion barrels beneath the barren tundra. The news sends a shockwave that has nothing to do with seismic activity. In the state capital in Juneau, barely a decade old since Alaska achieved statehood in 1959, politicians see a staggering vision, a financial sovereign wealth that could free the state forever from federal dependence. But between the oil and the bank lies an 800-mile obstacle, the land itself. To build the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, a project of unprecedented scale and environmental risk, Congress must first settle the explosive, generations-old question of who owns Alaska. The 1971 Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, ANCSA, is a bolt from the blue, a revolutionary and controversial solution. It extinguishes Aboriginal title, the legal basis for native land claims, not with reservations, but with a corporate payout. $962.5 million and title to 44 million acres. Overnight, over 200 native village and regional corporations are created, making shareholders out of hunters and fishermen. The pipeline, completed in 1977, becomes the new central artery of Alaska's lifeblood. It funds the permanent fund dividend, turning every Alaskan resident into a direct beneficiary of the state's mineral wealth. It creates a boomtown mentality, a new cycle of influx and greed. Yet it also solidifies the eternal Alaskan conflict, development versus preservation. The battle over the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, ANWR, becomes the symbolic frontline, a proxy war between a vision of Alaska as a limitless resource warehouse and as the world's last great wilderness. Today, the forces unleashed by Russia, America, gold, and oil still collide. The thawing permafrost from a warming climate threatens villages and infrastructure even as it opens new shipping lanes and resource prospects. The legacy of ANCSA empowers native corporations as economic giants while communities grapple with cultural erosion. Alaska stands at a precipice of its own making, a place forever caught between its untamed past and an uncertain, rapidly changing future. Its story a continuous loop of discovery, extraction, and the struggle to define what comes after the harvest.